Oh, very good, very good. Hey guys, welcome to That Pedal Show. VCQ, Dan here.
Mick here, hello. Well, we're a bit tired.
We are a bit tired. So we were at NAMM in LA last week. I say LA, it's in Anaheim.
Yes.
Close enough for me to call it
Yes.
LA because it's cool. You know what's really funny? How many people said, I thought you guys were coming.
Mad.
Yeah. It was amazing to meet so many of you out there. That was the highlight of the trip for me.
Yes, thank you to everyone who came and said hello.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
For anyone and everyone who came and said hello, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to meet you.
What an amazing show, though.
Yeah, brilliant show too. There was guitars and everything.
Oh man, it's really good. Okay, last Friday's show was the wet, dry, wet video.
It was actually 2 Fridays ago because we're catching up. So
oh yes, of course, because this isn't going out at all.
Yes, this will go out on Monday, whenever that is. So this will be the Friday before, and we will catch up. Dan and I are all around the place at the moment. I am currently in Greece as you watch this, seeing family. So we will catch up. But this is about the wet, dry, wet video we did 2 Fridays ago.
Yeah. And a couple of comments at the end about the setup video with our dear friend Mr. Johnny Kincaid. Okay, first question from Dad Rock Holiday. Great show. Just one question. I have a D-style amp. Do passive effects loops raise the send level above line level as you turn up the preamp or master? I'm running a DD500 and a Hall of Fame 2 in the loop. Thanks.
Presumably he means a D-Armand style amp, does he?
That's exactly right.
He might mean Dumble.
Yes, exactly. Okay, it's a good question. Every effects loop is different. Every single one's different, and
depends where it's driven and recovered.
Exactly. So it's, I've seen like 6 volts on the output of a send. They're all different. And they're not even same with one make of manufacturer. They vary. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows? They are all different. Best one I ever heard was in my 2-Rock Studio Pro 35, which was buffered on the return.
Right.
It's the best effects loop and the most useful one I'd ever heard.
Right.
Anyway, they do all differ.
I do like the Friedmans have really great. So I think the send and return is buffered and stuff. Anyway, all differ.
We should say that there were loads and loads of questions on people's specific rigs.
Yeah.
So, I run this, that and the other, this, that and the other. There were loads of those questions. We can't answer everyone individually. A, because it would take weeks. B, because all the theory is in the show. Right? Yeah. So if you've got a specific question about your rig, you need to start at first principles and work out where you want your splits, where your isolation needs to happen and all of that. So if you've got 28 pedals and you want some mega complex wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, damp, dry, A, it might not be possible. B, there are some compromises you're going to have to make. So I guess we might come on to it.
We do.
So we'll come on to it. But what I'm saying is we couldn't answer all the absolutely rig-specific questions because it's all different.
Yeah, exactly.
And the theory is all in the video. So you need to just break it down to its constituent parts and work up from there. Is that fair?
Perfect.
To wit. Oh, he's really not awake.
To wit?
You normally say to woo.
Oh.
It's been a tiring week.
Oh, it has been a tiring week. I'm so sorry. To woo.
William Sanderson, Jason Benson both ask, got a question regarding using 2 amps in a rehearsal room with a band. Where do I put the amps in relation to one another and in relation to other musicians?
I like this question. Put them facing you and as far away from everyone else as possible.
Yeah, it depends. If you've got stereo and you're in a trio and you want one amp either side of the drums, do that.
Yeah. Is that what Rabia does?
Yeah, and Jeff Buckley, honk. I think we've covered that before.
So you're taking your honk Rabia, but you can't honk Jeff Buckley?
No, yeah.
All right, there we go. Just making sure.
Dan and I both just put our 2 amps side by side as they are.
Yep.
Wet, dry, I like it to effectively come from one place.
Yes.
Otherwise, like, I'm hearing something over there and something over there, and I don't want this. You just keep fouling, and then you get this, and I don't want this. I want big bread. Was it miniature bread?
But I'm a professional.
Yeah.
I will carry on.
So yeah, it doesn't matter. Try some different stuff.
Yeah.
See what you like. Normally, physicality and space restraints dictate where you have to put them.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Yep. The Batigs, Graham Elliott, and Givon R were asking, if you're running a wet-dry rig, where would you put the looper? So, it's a really good question, this. If it depends on if you have a loop set up, right? And that loop, if you're happy with the wet effects being after that loop, then you can put it before the split. But if you want to have the loop set up and then
Hungry, mate?
I think my body has got no idea what's going on.
It was going brilliantly in the thing we did with Thomas Blue recently.
Was it really?
Yeah, it's like yelling down the.
I just want you to know.
Sorry, you were saying.
Okay, imagine if you've got the loop set up and then you have the delay and reverb after that. So the sound of the loop will be going into the delay and reverb, and that's where the effect will be. However, if you have the looper at the end, you can set up your sound with the delay and reverb and then capture that and loop that. But if that is part of the wet rig, then that will only be going through the wet side, if that makes sense. So that when you record the loop and hit play, it's only going to be coming out of one amplifier. Now, personally, I like that. That works really well for me. Otherwise, it's just putting it before the split.
Try it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there was a lot of reading the comments this week. There was a lot of breaking hearts going on about what people should do.
Yeah,
and actually,
try it.
There's just two options. So if you try both one, you'll know which one you like.
Absolutely,
instantly.
Yep.
Joshua O, Baseman Dudge, Adam Dobbs all ask, can you explain what exactly it means to isolate the signal? I understand why it's important, but I would like to know what's physically happening to the circuit when you isolate compared to not isolating. I'll just say, I don't know and I don't care. I just know that one of the amps needs to be. Dan?
Sure. So the idea with isolation is to avoid ground loops. And ground loops have this nasty habit of picking up noise. So if you can imagine, I've got two amplifiers and they're both connected to the mains. And that mains has got a ground. And that literally, where it says where the ground is, that is literally a massive steel pole banged into the ground. So it's like...
that's connected to the earth in the...
Exactly. Yeah. Connected to the earth. So it's like lightning.
It's like earth, man.
You've got positive charged ions always want to find the negative charged ions, right? Lightning goes to ground. It's always looking for that path to ground. So in the amplifier, you've got your mains, power, and voltages and everything, and they have the chassis is connected to the earth, right, and it's part of the circuit. If I join the two earths from the amplifier, I have multiple paths to earth or to ground, and that gives me this loop. If you can imagine that the earths are joined together, say I split my guitar signal that goes to two amplifiers, but all the earths are connected, there is this loop, right? And that loop is really susceptible to picking up noise. So the idea is that we have one path to earth from our guitar. There should be continuity from the shield. If you look at where your pickup is, you've got your the coil, and then one side of the coil basically goes to the shield, and the other side of the coil is your hot signal. Now, that shield that goes to earth, we want one path from that to ground. We don't want any more than that. So what a transformer isolator does, it means that you get this AC signal coming from the guitar, right? And it hits the transformer, and on the other side of the transformer you have this mirror image of this signal, but you don't have that earth connection, right? And the great thing about using a transformer isolation is that you can then flip the other side of the transformer so that you get we're in phase, which is a exact mirror image, or out of phase, which is the same signal out of phase. Right. So the idea is, again, you've got continuity between the shields. If you got the earth from the guitar plate and everything straight through to your pedal board, that through to your amplifier. When you split the signal, where it's split, you have transformer isolation, so that earth doesn't carry through to those points. One point through to the earth, the other points are isolated, transformer isolated. Now, it's very, very important. And this was mentioned a few times. People were asking if they can just remove the earth from the chassis of one amplifier. It is critical that you do not do that. It is very, very dangerous, and it has caused deaths in the past from people having no earth in the amplifier.
People dying of
People
death.
dying of death.
Don't do it, kids. Just get the box that does it for you.
There you go.
Which is perfectly safe to do so.
Yep. Does that make sense?
I don't know. There are some things, some levels of understanding that I just don't need.
Right.
And that's one of them.
Okay.
Because I just know that it works when you do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Which, no disrespect to you guys asking if you could understand it. However, you'd probably be better off hitting up Wikipedia and reading about physics.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could literally edit that whole section out.
No. It was interesting. I enjoyed it.
Okay, cool.
I'm just saying that for, if you want an actual physicist's electronics explanation
Sure.
with diagrams,
Finger puppets.
the internet was invented for that.
Brilliant. Bruno Rocker says, "Hi Dan and Mick, is it possible to get good wet dry results using 2 amps with different power, i.e. a 15 watt and a 50 watt? Absolutely. It's experimenting with different types of amplifiers, different voice amplifiers, different power amplifiers. Perfect.
I think we've said this before. You also mentioned like you can push the lower power one a bit harder so it crunches up a bit more. Brilliant, all great. And some people like to do that to extremes where you have one really overdriven and one super clean. Dan and I don't get on so well with that.
No.
Because you get a dynamics difference. So for example, then you step on a boost pedal, the amp that's already squashing goes away in terms of volume because it's just squashing more.
Yes.
And then the loud amp starts blowing your head off because it's really loud.
So Christopher Vad, and that was the next question.
Oh, okay.
And it's exactly the same thing. Christopher Vad was asking, I have a dry amp on the edge of breakout for my clean sound, or 3 amps at a similar volume. My wet amps have higher headroom than my dry amp, as per your instruction, but when I engage one of my drive pedals to push the amps, the wet amps become too loud compared to the dry amp. I can combat this by using a boost on the dry amp after the split to take off a smidge from the wet amps, but is there a better, easier solution?
Oh, it's a perfect real-world example.
It's exactly what Mick was saying. The amps that have higher headroom, when you push them, they get louder, but the amp that's crunching has lower headroom, and when you push that, it just gets more gain. So
you could use that to your advantage. Like, for example, if you wanted, dear old Joe Bonamassa, honk, he used to use a multi-amp setup back before his tweeds and his dumbles, where he would use his Marshall Jubilee that was always on and kind of bubbling underneath, and then he would use
good sound.
He would use one of 3 other mid-pushed amps,
Right,
which he would kick in for solos and stuff.
right.
So it might be that in that instance you've got one amp that's overdriving the Marshall more than the other 2, and you want one of them to poke out more when you solo because you just get definition and bigness and all of that. So you can use it to your advantage, but if it's a problem, the thing to understand is, the amps need to be of similar headroom characteristics.
If you want that equal boost.
The solution is get the dry amp driving less or the wet amps driving more and bring them closer together.
Very good.
In headroom.
Very good.
Let's see. Joe Brennan. Hello, Joe. How do you handle wet dry with 2-channel amps? Channel switching seems like it would be a pain. Not at all.
No. So there's a couple of things you need to be aware of. Lots of the times when you have a channel switching amplifier, the channels aren't in phase.
Oh, brilliant.
So, you can have, you might go to your dirty sound, but the other amplifier doesn't change the channels, and all of a sudden you change channels, they're out of phase. If you have a channel changing amplifier, but you want to use that preamp into, let's say you got a wet rig, it's at the end of the video where we talk about using the preamp as the main focus, and then preamp sends signals out to the wet effects, but still using the preamp for the center dry thing, and that gets rid of that problem with the different phasing stuff. But no, wet dry with 2-channel amplifiers is great.
I believe that's the way Andy Timmons does it, isn't it? He plugs into one of his Lone Stars, and then he runs the effects send out into the other one.
Exactly.
So he's only using one preamp of one of his amps.
Exactly.
That feeds both power sections in the two separate amps.
Perfect.
So that could be one way that you would achieve that.
Yep.
Nick M. How about when you have a wet-dry setup in phase, then when you turn on your delay, it flips the phase, making it out of phase? How do you fix that?
It's a pain in the bum.
Yes, so I've had that exact problem with my Catlin Bred Belly Pop Deluxe, and the way I chose to fix it, Dan makes a device that can flip the phase.
It's basically a little audio transformer that basically flips the phase on one side. It's really simple, but that works with the delay pedal that I have in a loop. So the send goes to the delay, out of the delay goes into this little phase flipper, and then back into the return of the loop. So when I turn that loop on, that pedal is in phase.
Yes.
Right? The way Mick has done it, which I really like, and this is again Andy Timmons. Oh man, we saw Andy play.
He was crazy good.
Oh my goodness,
he was absolutely insanely good. He played with Paul Gilbert and Andy Wood, and Mark Lettieri. I mean, what a gig! What a gig! What a crazy guitar player's gig!
Yeah,
it was nuts.
It was nuts, and everyone was great. Andy was just on.
He was astonishing.
Just on stunning form.
Utterly astonishing. Anyway,
so that's what Andy does with his delays on all the time, but he has an expression pedal.
Yeah.
That simply alters the delay effects level. And that's what you do with your delay as well.
So there's a common theme running through a lot of these specific questions where there is some element of compromise required somewhere.
Yeah.
And the element of compromise that I have gone for is to leave the delay on all the time because I really like the sound of the preamp.
Yeah.
And then, as Dan says, altering the wet level with a mini expression pedal. And actually that gives me some increased functionality in that I have control over that effect level, so I can have more or less delay rather than just on and off. So taking a compromise situation and turning it into an advantage that gives you a bit of extra functionality. But for a moment there, I was thinking of getting rid of the Belly Pop Deluxe because it was just a problem I didn't want to deal with.
Sure.
So yeah, in the face of adversity, there is opportunity.
There is indeed.
There's probably a better quote than that.
Matthew Cook says, I know you wouldn't get the width of sound, but couldn't you get the same sort of thing with one amp by running your wet effects in parallel to your dry amp, then back to mono, for instance with the JHS buffer splitter and then the summing amp? Now, the thing with this, the whole idea with wet dry is that you have the sound sound's coming from two different sources. Your dry is going into both, but your wet is only coming out of one. That enables you to get a lot more wet into the wet amp, but you still have the attack and initial response from the dry amp. Now, the thing with the parallel thing and the summing amp, parallel is a really interesting thing that we are going to get to in the near future. However, if you think about the way a delay pedal works, the delay already has that parallel thing in it. You've got your dry signal and then you've got your wet blend. That is exactly what a parallel thing does. So it is a different thing. It is a different thing. If all I can say is you need to experience this. If you have in your head that simply having the wet dry thing in parallel, I mean, it's a cool thing to do, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. No, it could be effective because again, you could blend that wet into to however much you want it. But funnily enough, I was thinking of how to do wet dry in a more compact fashion and thinking of just running a 212 or a 412 that was split so that one half of the 212 or one half of the 412, either one speaker or two speakers, was running wet and the other half was running dry. But even then, without that physical isolation of the two cabs, it's still not quite the same thing.
If you're running a wet dry in one cab where the speakers aren't isolated, the speakers are in the same space, then it's still a cool thing.
Still cool, but not quite the same thing.
Not quite the same. Right, Jerry Lasseter says, in wet, dry, wet, do you get a ground, earth or phase problems from the stereo out on delays? does that require a second humdinger on one side of the stereo out? So it can do. If your stereo delay doesn't have an isolation output on the the stereo side, the secondary side, then yes, you can get earth loops. Lots of people do this without any problems, but just be aware that if you do get problems with that, the third output, because in a wet, dry, wet, you have your dry signal split, isolated out, goes to the dry, and then the signal from the split carries on, goes to a stereo effect, out, left and right, to your stereo amplifiers. Now, you've got two paths to earth there. You may get an earth loop. If you don't have any problems, fantastic. But if you do, you may need to isolate one of the outputs.
That's how you fix it.
Exactly.
In terms of phase, if you're running into a stereo power amp, then no, you're not going to have any phase problems there, unless, of course, it's out of phase with your dry amp. But if you were running into two separate amplifiers, it really depends on the amps, because they may be out of phase with one another. Yep. So if you just take your Boss digital delay that's got a stereo out, yes, what's coming out of there will be the same phase, but when it hits the two amps, there's no telling that they're going to be in phase.
That's right.
Yeah. So you may need to correct phase depending on what amplifiers you're using.
Yep, perfect.
TSMI 37. Amazing explanation of how this works. Unfortunately, now I have to buy more gear, but at least I understand why.
I love that.
Perfect.
That's really good.
Alex Boyakov. Alex Boyakov. I knew that was coming. I was resisting the temptation to do it. I thought if you run your guitar into any pedal before the amp's input, it's not dry already.
So, no. There's a difference between a direct signal and a dry signal.
Oh, I see. He's saying... Right.
If you put any effect, it doesn't dry. It's not dry. Yeah. No, it's the idea is a dry signal is any signal that doesn't have the wet on it.
Well, it depends. A studio engineer might say that, for example, if you're tracking guitars and you take a DI from your guitar straight into the desk, so it can be reamped. Some people might describe that as dry.
It wouldn't be dry, but that's a direct signal.
Yeah. Different thing. It's it's words, people.
It's words.
It's words. Dry in our world means
words.
Dry in our world means no modulation, no reverb, no delay, basically.
Lovely. Right, J Dowd XC7. I run wet dry with 2-channel Mesa, a single rec and a 2-channel Marshall DSL. I run both heads into one stereo 4x12. I keep the DSL set to crunch and channel switch the Mesa between clean and dirty. This makes up my clean tone, slightly push sounding, and my heavy tone, think big rec kind of tones. These amps really fill each other out well, but when I channel switch, it seems to reverse phase. So it goes back to exactly what we were talking about before. The channels in those amplifiers, it just takes one of those channels as you switch to be out of phase, and the whole thing is difficult.
Goodness me! So what can you do about that? If you had a switcher, you could have it all programmed.
Yes.
So that when you hit, if you had G2 for example, when you hit patch 3, that could change the channel on the Mesa and flip the phase on amp 2 output. But if you don't have that, I don't know of another device that will do it in one foot switch.
One thing to consider is if those amplifiers, so some of these 2-channel amplifiers have a separate effects loop for each channel, and you might be able to get a device in that loop that flips the phase. Hey presto, job done.
You'd still have to step on 2 buttons at once, wouldn't you?
Well, no, because if whatever happens when you switch, when you go to the lead channel or whatever, that flips the phase.
So the problem is with the Mesa, the single rectifier, that only has a mono effects loop. Only has an effects loop for one channel, so that's not an option there. However, I believe in certain Mesas you can choose whether the effects loop is on or not
for that channel.
For that channel.
There you go.
So is that what you said?
Yeah. So it's either you can have some amplifiers have a separate effects loop for each channel, but if you can do that,
you can turn the effects loop on and off.
There you go.
In a channel, you can assign the effects loop to a different channel. Is what I'm saying.
Right.
In some Mesas, and I don't know if it is in that one or not. So there's an option.
There you go.
For you. I hope that was at least partly clear. Nice big Wreck reference, by the way. Ian
Yes.
Thornley. Man, what a player.
Yeah, he's
What
amazing.
a player he is.
Okay, Juan Martin Reberati. If the all-wet rig is getting muddy because everything is going out from the same speakers, then doing the wet-dry and going into the PA, isn't it getting muddy again by putting everything in the same speakers all over again? No. And the reason being is that the PA speakers are designed to handle this full frequency, crazy headroom. They're there to have all the drums and bass and guitars and vocals, everything in there. Guitar amplifier is not designed like that. A guitar amplifier is pushing the frequencies that we like, and part of the speaker breakup is part of the sound of the amp. So it is a different thing.
You are also giving the engineer the option.
I've got a couple of engineers actually who've posted
to mix more or less mud
exactly
in for you.
Exactly.
So they can control it. William Davis, Ian King are both sound guys, as Dan says.
There we go.
Sound engineers. As a sound engineer, wet dry guitar rigs make complete sense to me, says either William or Ian. It's common to add a send to an auxiliary track. If you think about recording, you would put a reverb or a delay on an aux send in your DAW, for example. Leaving the original track unaffected and blending this in with the affected aux track. It sounds magic. Yep. Yes, it does.
And it gives the sound guy also complete control over how much wet. If he's miking up the dry amp, miking up the wet amp, the sound guy has control over how much wet and dry is coming out of front of house. It may be a really dead room where he wants more effect, or she, identifying as whatever you like, coming out of front of house.
Like a woman, for example.
There you go. Identifies as a lesbian trapped in a man's body.
Hey.
Right. So, there may be times where the sound guy needs more wet because the room is really dead. But if it's you're playing in a hall or something, the sound guy might want to pull the wet back. Talking to Brian from Radiohead, so he has a wonderful wet dry rig set up, and the sound guy loves that because he can. What Ed does, there's so much texture, and it's really important for the tunes. And the sound guy knows exactly how they're supposed to sound, and he can tailor that to the room.
Yeah.
It's really, really great.
Tony Lemieux. Maybe I'm crazy. But sometimes when your on-screen notes said it was out of phase, to me, the sound had more bass than when you said it was in phase. There are two reasons for this. One is we did have some audio gremlins.
There were some audio gremlins in that, yeah.
Listening back to it, there were sections where the 2-Rock had lost a load of definition and volume, and we don't exactly know what it was. We decided to leave it because all the theory is sound and most of the other sounds were fine. But there were sections throughout the video where even I was unsure of the phase, and I was looking at the waveforms and they weren't completely in or out of phase. Sometimes they were half a cycle shifted. So whether that was some sort of digital effect or something, I've literally no idea what it was.
Yeah.
But what it underlines is that phase is not a definite thing.
Yeah,
it is in physics, it's a definite thing, but in reality, it never is.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, and it comes down to when you're setting your amps up in phase, you want the one that just sounds fuller. If you have two exactly the same amplifiers receiving exactly the same signal, then it's really easy to work out which is in phase and which isn't. But when you have two different amplifiers, especially if you've got an amplifier with a 10-inch speaker and a 12-inch speaker, it can be so tricky to work out which is in phase. But you go with the one that has more, that has fuller.
Yeah.
And that just means that more of the signal is in phase.
Yeah. Completely. Plus, we've got room mics, remember?
Yes, that's right.
So even what's coming off the mics, which are exactly the same mics at exactly the same distance from the speaker, get those sorted out. There's a stereo mid-side configuration at the back of the room, and those amps might be as much as 2 or 3 feet apart. On the triangle, that makes some difference to the distance to the mic. So
all that stuff.
So no, you're not mad, Tony.
Yeah.
Or indeed crazy.
Craig Headland says, I was wondering if using the two if you're using two of the same amps in a wet dry setup would undermine having a wet dry rig, i.e. two different amps are better sonically. No, not at all. Using two of the same amplifiers can be absolutely brilliant for wet dry rig.
It's just all up for grabs, isn't it?
All up for grabs.
I mean, what you're hinting at is, are there advantages to be had or sonic benefits by using two different things that mix in a really nice way? Yeah.
Possibly, yeah.
But it depends what they are.
Yeah. And if you have one amplifier that is absolutely your sound, then, like listening to Andy uses lots of different amps when he records, but live he generally uses the Lone Star. And everything that he needs to express what he does is in that amplifier.
Yeah.
Therefore, he uses two of them.
And it definitely gets around that difference in headroom issue that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So the pedals will all react exactly the same into the two different amps.
Yep.
So, swings and roundabouts.
Absolutely. I love this comment. This is great.
In which case, why don't you read it out?
Okay, so Dom Cole said, "This video made the Dan half of my brain happy, which made my rig sound better, making the Mick half of my brain happy." Does that make Simon the little voice of reason in the back of my head? Watching you guys is like having a personal guitar clinic on tap. Thanks for another great video. Looking forward to Monday follow-ups and shenanigans.
Thank you, Dom.
That's really lovely.
Yeah, it's very nice for you to say.
Really great.
Very nice for you to say.
Had a couple of quick comments on the setup video. So I did a vlog this week with our dear friend Johnny Kincaid, and just on some basic principles of setting up your guitar.
It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant.
Oh,
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Awesome!
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. And just a couple of comments. Julian Valois Dobby, Brooke Kitesurf, and Mark Nicholas both commented on the Fender truss rod location being the daftest bit of design. There's no need for that in 2019.
So it's the only place it should be, and it should never be anywhere else.
So you don't think it should be at the headstop?
No, I blooming don't.
Awesome. There you go.
Look, if you want a new guitar with a headstock with a truss rod thingy in a different place, buy a new guitar. Don't touch my vintage Strat. Leave it exactly as it is. I don't want a hole in the end of there where there should not be a hole. All right.
Very good.
I just don't want it. Plus, actually, I have heard it said that there's a physical effect of having the nut and the end, the adjuster and the end thing at different ends, and there is some load of old cobblers about why that's important.
Right.
Also, bear in mind that most modern guitars actually have a two-way truss rod. So in the old Fender style, it's a one-way. It only does that.
Yeah.
Right. But in like a PRS, for example, I think, and certain other Fenders, it's a two-way. So it will do both of those directions, much more tweaky, much more control. So if you want a modern guitar, get a modern guitar. Please don't touch my vintage Fenders.
Okay, you heard it here, folks.
By the way, you don't have to take the neck off. You can just undo. Johnny only took the neck off because he had some other business in there. But you don't have to take the whole thing off.
He was checking the neck
pocket. Yeah. You have to. You can just unscrew them a little bit, which is still more of a faff than doing it. I know. I think I've adjusted the truss rod on Blue once in 10 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
However, I had a G&L ASAT that I had to do at every gig.
Really?
And I was very happy that it was up the other end.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. BB Maid said, for anyone wanting to fine tune their nut slots on their own. So, part of the video, you'll see Johnny. He has all his little nut files out, and he's just getting the nut perfect on the guitar. So BB Maid says, for anyone wanting to fine-tune the nut slots on their own, if you've never done it before, it's very, very easy to screw it up. We're watching someone who has done it thousands of times. Just food for thought. And yes, that's a really good point. If you don't know what you're doing with the nut, get someone who knows how to do it, because it's so easy to mess that up.
Any guitar maintenance usually involves a couple of times getting it wrong.
Sure.
And you and I have both found out the hard way.
Absolutely.
Usually on rubbish old cheap guitars, but not always. And then you have to go through a costly repair. I'm still a fan of doing things myself.
Yeah.
And learning by my mistakes.
Yeah.
But just be aware that that's what you're doing, which is what you're saying, BB Made. Aaron Parker. Hello, Aaron. Why not replace the nut with bone? Seems like something Dan would have wanted.
Yeah, well, I may do in the future, but for the moment, this video was about something some information that you guys could at home use,
Yeah.
and, you know, to understanding basic things like intonation and truss rods and things, the things that you can tinker with without destroying the guitar.
Yeah.
You know, I may get a bone nut. You know, we'll see. We'll see. But for them, you know, that wasn't the purpose of this video.
There's quite a lot of comments like this that did make me laugh with respect to you guys, but to be fair, it wasn't explained in the video.
Right.
So AB Kama says, Dan, when you said it's a different guitar, and that note just rang out, was the guitar unplugged? Because the sustain coming off the guitar was completely insane.
So, I'll show you why that was. The guitar wasn't plugged into an amplifier. Right. The sustainer on this guitar here, it's a physical effect on the strings, so it doesn't have to be plugged into an amplifier to hear it. But the guitar does need to be plugged in.
Because
someone said
puts the battery.
Someone said, "Oh, this video was great," but when I saw Dan plugging the Strat from underneath, it just made him feel all wrong.
Oh yeah.
So,
which either meant it didn't need to be plugged in, or the jack plug socket is in the wrong place.
Yeah, right.
Which it is.
So, if I turn the sustainer on, and then I hit a note,
you could go away and have a bite.
so it happens acoustically on the guitar, which is wonderful.
This is a physical actuator,
Yeah.
and it is causing the string to vibrate. Just in case you're not aware of that, it's basically like an EBow, but
Yeah, same principle.
but in the guitar.
Yeah, but yeah, Johnny has done an amazing job on this, and it is different guitar than what I turned up there with. So many thanks to Mr. Kincaid.
Christopher Reeves, what's the zigzag on the last two?
Oh, okay. So when Johnny was putting the strings on, if you see here on these old headstock style things where they've got the split capstan area, instead of just putting the string, because there's a hole in the center where you put your string down and then wrap it around. Okay, what Johnny was doing, he put the string down, he would come out, he'd wrap it the opposite way to start with, and then come back over and then wrap it the normal way. So you end up with this cross.
It's not dissimilar to what happens with some people do on Gibson, where you basically tie it off to lock it. Now, next Tuesday, possibly tomorrow, there's a video where I talk about restringing my Strat, because we've got some new strings, and I make the comment that I think those are the best locking tuning pegs ever invented. The only tuning pegs that I've ever had that have slipped have been locking tuners.
Yeah.
Those things, I don't even bother with a zigzag. I just put them
straight
them all in the same. I have literally never, ever, ever had a string slip in one of those.
Right.
In one of those tuning pegs. So
I just thought it was a matter of habit.
no, I'm not saying it's not the right way to do it at all. I'm saying that they are brilliant locking tuning pegs.
Yeah, they are.
And genuinely, the only ones I've ever had slip have been Spurzels. Ever. Because the thing wears and you don't do it up tight enough or whatever. Which is not to annoy everyone who uses Spurzels, of course. Right.
That's it.
That's us then.
Done.
I'm going to Greece.
You're going to Greece.
Please enjoy this week's videos.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a fantastic week and we'll see you soon. Bye.